Sometimes these other human characters that we come across on our path can really seem to piss us off. I know. Or it could feel like we're being thrown into a giant sea, a stormy sea, full of huge emotional waves. We can be triggered by others' actions or non-actions, their words or their silence. And in this episode, round 1 of fighting, we find out what Spirit has for us to know on how we can make these little interactions we have with other humans less conflicting if we're tired of feeling that way. We do talk about why do people cheat? Why does it hurt so much? And some things what we can do to make this an easier path. So stay tuned. Hey, my Zen friend, welcome to the next adventure of the easier path with your Brother Zen. I shared the intention of this podcast series each adventure because I feel it's important for the experience. The focus of this series is not to convince you this human journey is easy. The intention is to share challenges we encounter along the way as a human character and provide wisdom and guidance from Spirit that could help transform those challenges into higher truth. I'm not a licensed psychologist or doctorate of any kind. I'm simply sharing what I have experienced and what I feel the spirit world would like us to know. The intention is that you have new information to create new opportunities of ease in your adventure, or at the very least confirm and remind you of things you already know but maybe have temporarily been distracted from because of the loudness and bright shininess of things in the human adventure. All of this is about making the human adventure easier rather than harder, if that's what we want to experience. Hey, it's your adventure, and you get to choose what you want to experience. There's no judgment from Spirit or from me. You do you, boo. So thanks for being here. I appreciate you. Before we begin our adventure, let us first come out of the storm and into the calm. We cannot clearly hear or transform when we're in stress or fear. So we'll take a big deep breath in for a count of 4, hold it for 3, and then exhale slowly for a count of 7. And we can do that as many times as we feel we need to in order to have at least a small sense of calm in this moment. So let's begin. Big deep breath in for a count of 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold it for 1, 2, 3, and exhale 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Again, do that as many times as you would like. You can pause the video, and then we'll jump into story time with your Brother Zen. One of our big fights in this human adventure with other human characters is when they don't do what we agreed that they would do. A huge one that brings some of the most extreme emotions in our present society is when someone doesn't stand by their vow most strongly of only having intimacy with us. And that can be emotional intimacy, mental intimacy, but the one that seems to upset us the most is when they have physical intimacy with someone else. Odd that, when we think about it, right, hasn't seemed to bother me when my partners had emotional intimacy with friends and family, feeling deep emotions with each other, and mental intimacy, where they had great conversations and mental connections with others, but touch those lips and other private parts together and suddenly becomes a very big deal. Seems strange, right? Well, we'll dive more into that in the next part of this episode, but let's have a little bit of story time with your Brother Zen about some of my own fun experiences, in quotation marks, of my own life. In the last episode, I mentioned that I had 5 what I call long-term-ish relationships. I had a 3-year, and then a 1-year, and then a 3-year, and then a 1-year. Then I had 3 years of singlehood, and then one final 1 year. So I definitely had a pattern that didn't stand out to me until my reflective period after those 12 years. Now, the first cut is the deepest, right, as that song goes. It was my first relationship, and what I had experienced in life and within the gay community for the 6 months or so since I came out was that everyone struggled being faithful in their relationships. Of course, now I know it's not just the gay community, but that was my experience. And as I entered my first relationship, I had made a bit of peace with what I took as a fact. People cheat on each other. I knew I would not be a cheater because of the pain I experienced through my mother and her experiences with her 2 marriages. But when I told my first boyfriend this, he said he was going to prove me wrong. He convinced me he was different, and I fell into believing them. 6 months into the relationship, back in the days of AOL dial-up, yes, that's centuries ago, I know. But I was on our computer while he was at work, and I had deleted something that I needed to recover. So I went into a place on AOL that you could ask for deleted things back, and whoosh, I found what I had deleted, but I also found deleted communication between my boyfriend and someone else, talking about getting together and providing our home phone number. Yeah, again, this was before cell phones and pagers, etc., being widely used. So as I read those messages, wow, my heart sank. And it felt like someone was sticking swords into it. I didn't want to believe it. You know, I had taken on a belief growing up that others' actions meant something about my worth, and someone looking outside the relationship meant I wasn't enough. I had failed. So I printed out the chain of communication between them and left it by the computer, which was by the door as you walked into the room. And when they got home, I was laying on the couch in the dark with just the TV on. Yes, it was very dramatic. He asked what was wrong, and I pointed to the computer desk, and he went over and asked, "What was this?" And then he read it. I got up and went to the bedroom to lie in the bed as I started to cry. He came after me swiftly, apologizing and saying nothing happened, and attempted to convince me that he just liked flirting and that he accidentally gave our real home phone number because he would give wrong phone numbers normally. Normally? That told me he did it often, and that he thought I was stupid if I was going to believe that he gave a wrong number accidentally. He said he would stop and that he would stop the internet, so we did. And I had to believe that, once that you're in a relationship, it was supposed to be forever, as my mom hung out for, over 20 years trying to make it work with my father, and even though he was likely repeating the pattern of cheating on her the whole time. So, for 2.5 years more, I tried to trust him, but I had pulled back within my walls and was rarely affectionate toward him. And at 3 years, he asked me what he had to do to trust him again. And remember, this is before cell phones, when pagers were starting to be used, but mainly by business people and drug dealers. So, after thinking about his questions for a moment, I replied honestly that he would have to hire a private investigator to follow him around, and that he would have a pager on him at all times and call me immediately if I paged him. It seemed unreasonable, but it was the truth at the time, so I ended the relationship knowing it was best for both of us. He was living with me, and I had co-signed for a lease on his vehicle. Yeah, he had it really good, right? I was an overgiver. Definitely, an overgiver in codependent relationship. So who wouldn't want to be with an overgiver, right? I would want to be with me too. But the pattern continued with number 2, a boyfriend, when he came around. After knowing them just 6 months, I moved out of state with them to be near his children, sacrificing my job and a lot of my possessions and my friends to follow love. I even co-signed for a car lease for him too. Slow learner, hello. He traveled for work a couple of times a month, and I was working a lot too at a new job, even sometimes on Saturdays. One Saturday, I came home earlier than I thought I was going to work, and I found him in front of the computer. He looked panicked a little as I walked over to him, and I noticed he had a little chat minimized on the bottom of the screen, which he had, minimized when I walked in, with someone who had the initials MD after their name, which was the state he traveled to monthly. I asked what it was, and he said it was nothing, just chatting with someone, and he clicked to close it instead of bringing it up and maximizing so I could see it, right? Ugh. Anyway, a few months later, I left on a Saturday morning to go to work for a few hours, and I was like 5 minutes from work. When I got to work, I forgot my badge, and to be able to get into the building, I had to have it, so I had to drive back to get my badge real quick. I know, you can feel it already, right? Here it comes. I walked in to find him buck naked in front of the computer, and he was across the room. And he said he was hot. So I started to walk over to him, and he turned the power button on the computer to shut everything on the computer off. And I stopped right there in my tracks, and I told him that was the worst thing he could have done, because now I suspected him of everything, and he couldn't prove otherwise. So I went back, took my badge, walked out the door, and stayed at work for several hours. He kept trying to call me at work again, but this was no cell phone times again, back in those days. So after a couple of hours, him calling like every half hour and hanging up because I could see who was calling on my caller ID on my phone at work, I finally answered, and when he tried calling again, and he asked if are you coming home? I could still hear it in my head. And I told him eventually, and then I politely ended the call, and because of course I was at work, no one else was around, but I just ended it. Didn't want to be that person. But it was then that I decided I was moving back to Colorado after being there for 6 months. So that lasted a year. Now the heartache this time was less than the first. I was quicker to leave because I realized that once someone is a cheater and my trust is broken, they usually won't stop unless they do a lot of inner transformation. And I'll talk more about why people cheat in a moment and why it seems to hurt so badly when they do. I know, here we go. Number 3. They didn't cheat that I know of, but their ex had cheated on them, so I feel like they were aware of how much it hurt to have it happen to them. Number 4 didn't really cheat because we weren't really in a committed relationship. They had said that up front, and they weren't ready for a relationship. They had just gotten out of a 11-year relationship. I had just gotten out of my 3-year relationship. So we both were on that same page, and I don't want to just jump into another relationship either. But we ended up staying at each other's places every night, going back and forth, until someone they had been chatting with from Europe was visiting, and he wanted to go sleep with them because they'd been talking for a long time. And so my mind knew it wasn't cheating because of the agreement, but my heart had already committed to them. So it felt betrayed anyway. I'm sure some of you can relate to that. And then number 5 wasn't a cheater either, so evidently had grown through the relationships, and he had followed a 3-year period of me being single, not exclusively dating anyone, and taking time to get to know myself and explore what love was about. And I'd also been on a more deeply spiritual journey since my first relationship was ending, opening up to spirit more and learning about my own self-worth and self-love. I also went to therapy while with my third relationship because he said if I didn't go and get my trust issues looked at, we weren't going to last, so that also helped. You know, we do learn so much through our relationships with humans, especially our intimate ones. I'm now able to look at each of these individuals as my great teachers, showing me what I wanted to see about myself. We learn a lot about ourselves in the reflection of these amazing mirrors. And I did. I learned a lot about my self-love and my self-worth, and lack thereof. So I have no regrets now that I'm on this side of Kakapupu Valley, which is usually the case. When we're walking through Kakapupu Valley and it's up to our nose, we don't appreciate it as much until after we're on the other side, all cleaned off, smelling like pretty flowers, looking back and seeing how much we've grown from the experience. So I love who I am today, and I wouldn't be who I am without having experienced those loves of my life. Before we continue, let's take another big breath, because all these stories may have, kind of ignited some emotions in both you and me. So let's take a deep breath in for a count of 4, hold it for 3, and exhale slowly for a count of 7, like we did in the beginning. So here we go. Big deep breath in. Hold for 3, and exhale slowly. Do that again as many times as you need to feel comfortable. And then we'll jump into here, see the different perspectives from the human and from spirit. Maybe it can help us if we're able to understand why these experiences seem to suck from our human character's perspective. There are at least 2 sides of us that are experiencing the moment, one being our human character and the other being the actor behind this character, which is our higher self, who's made of unconditional love, that eternal spirit being. So seeing things from a human perspective allows our human side to possibly see things in a different way, and then we'll also look at the higher perspectives. Why physical cheating matters so much to us. It's an interesting question to me to ponder why someone physically cheating on us seems to bother us so much more than other types of intimacy that our partners could find in others. I can imagine a time when we were more concerned about someone becoming more emotionally connected to someone else than us, and that physical contact didn't mean so much because it was seen as a physical act that someone could go through without emotional attachment. There could also have been a time that individuals were concerned about their partner becoming mentally connected to someone else, where they enjoyed someone else's conversations and mental interactions more than with us. Maybe those times are now for some individuals, which brings us to a possible explanation. Each person, their experience of what someone's actions mean, are individual, rooted in each of our individual upbringing and conditioning. It matters to us because that's what we've been taught it's supposed to mean to us. We hear it from family members, movies, books, leaders, social media, and the news. The drama that surrounds someone when they were cheated on. And we feel we're supposed to react the same, applying the same story, feeling the suggested emotions, taking the physical actions, and investing our energy towards betrayal and or revenge, or expressing the devastation that we feel we're supposed to. We all handle death in a different way, and perceived death of a relationship is among those. You've seen how some people wail over a casket, expressing their grief in a loud and dramatic way. Others have celebrations of life, where there are tears of loss with tears of joy, as they remember the person for who they were and the fun times they had together. Others fall somewhere in between at different moments. So it's not what is happening that impacts us, but the story of what we make it for us individually. There are some societies where having another person on the side is expected and is their acceptable norm. What? I know. For those of us that don't have that, we think, oh, that's weird. But for them, they look at us and think we're weird, right? But the empowering aspect of all this is that you are the only one who can decide what the story is for you. Others may suggest what your story could be with the energy that it should be, what you think and feel and act like. But you are the one who either takes on that story or not. You can recreate a new story if you wish to. In my reflection period after my relationships, I edited my story with awareness from Spirit, and I'll share some details on that in a few moments when we talk about the hints from Spirit. Why it hurts. So the second question I want to talk more about is, why does it frickin' hurt so much when someone cheats, right? Is heartbreak real? It sure feels like it when it happens. And I know that when I felt my first heartbreak, it did feel like someone was sticking swords in my heart, like the Three of Swords in the tarot, which is the energy of heartbreak and disappointment with expectations not being fulfilled. So it's a great picture of that. What Spirit shared with me is that our hearts can never be truly broken. They're too powerful for that. But we do come here to experience what it might feel like to be in fear, and that is what heartbreak is. They reminded me of how my older brother and I used to scare the crap out of each other, and how you feel a prick in the heart when you're suddenly startled. That is the prick we feel in our heart when fear is ignited by someone else's actions, their non-actions, their words, or their silence. The difference is that when I realized it was my brother scaring me, the fear subsided and went away. But when we face an emotional monster, an emotional scare, an emotional startling, that sparks fear in our hearts. And it doesn't go away until we're either distracted from the emotion or we transform the emotional fear through looking into what is triggering it. Sometimes the fear goes away when we bounce into a new relationship quickly, like replacing the pain of losing one dog by buying a new puppy, right? We don't deal with the emotions, we just smooth over the painful ones with happier ones until it all eventually comes to the surface at the perfect time. And the emotional pain, because it doesn't go away without doing those things, it loops over and over again. So we keep experiencing the pain over and over and over because we don't deal with the source. We just keep remembering, I'm in pain, I've been betrayed, I'm not loved, whatever those stories are. So that's why it hurts so much. It is us going into fear. But what is it that we fear that can make us feel this way? Well, there's a few we can talk about. We might fear we will never find love again, especially if it is our first love or maybe our second love, right? If we can't find love again, then we conclude we are not lovable, we will be rejected by everyone for not being lovable, and we'll end up dying alone on the outside of town from starvation and be eaten by wolves or whatever fear is sneaking around down there under the surface. But we do find love. We always will, because our relationships happen for us, and our paths are riddled with many opportunities to experience love, the stepping stones we want to experience to show us what we want to see about ourselves. Around relationship 4 for me is when I thought, oh God, I'm going to find love again, aren't I? So the fear can change from fearing we're not going to find love again to that we will, or that we'll find the same kind of love again. We also might fear that the other person's choices mean something about our worth, because that's what we're usually taught, right? Most of us seem to be taught that the 3 buckets of the outside world are what define us: relationships, situations, and things. Relationships of all different kinds with humans, whether that's romantic, friends, family, coworkers, whatever. Situations such as jobs, career, education, social status, situationships of all kinds. And things of the outside world, our bodies, our bank accounts, our possessions. So many different expectations on what those buckets should contain in order for us to be lovable, acceptable, successful, or whatever term we use for judging our worth. We see it portrayed in movies, books, other human characters' lives. It must be true, this opinion that is suggested to us. So we accept it because we think that is normal and correct. But when we define ourselves from the outside world, that is not self-worth. That's retail price. What we think or feel someone thinks or feels that we are worth to them. That's retail. But that doesn't mean that price is right. The price is right. It's not. That's just their suggested retail price. Our manufacturer's suggested retail, which our manufacturer, our creator's suggested retail worth is priceless. And that's the value we find of our worth when we turn inward and upward rather than outward. When we realize that this inner price is the true value of our worth, then we stop giving so much importance to the opinions of the outside world and feel less fear all around it all. And we might fear that we will never find love like this again. Something that was brought to my awareness after 5 longest-term relationships was that the love I felt for each, at its core, was the same for each one, because the love we're feeling is generated within us. How we feel when we are with others who we feel love us is so much related to how we feel about ourselves. It's an expression of our self-love. So every relationship, romantic and otherwise, is an expression of how we love ourselves. We have the ability to generate that same love with anyone. And that helps us not become so fearful of losing something that is inside of us if something in the outside world changes. So this we're talking about, it's like, but I love them so much, I'm never going to find love like this again. But we will, because it happens inside of us, not outside of us. So note that if we do inner work, then the feelings do feel or can feel a little different each time, because if we do little inner work regarding relationships, we'll tend to feel mostly the same from person to person. I know that's what I did when I was a habitual, serial monogamist is what the word is. You jump from person to person to person to person with not a whole lot of time in between to learn and to grow. So I highly recommend pausing and learning, but I like learning the hard way, and maybe you do too, so no judgment here for sure. Why do humans cheat? It's not a conscious thing, and that's important to know. A human doesn't wake up in the morning and think, oh boy, you know what I want to do today? I want to betray a promise. I want to take the chance at ruining a relationship I have with someone. That I really want to be a source of triggers for someone where they can experience a lot of emotional pain. It's not how it works. A human's intention usually isn't about others. It seems to, more times than none, be about themselves. The seeking of feeling complete, feeling happy, feeling pleasure, not feeling pain, not fearing, ultimately feeling safe and in control. Because that's what our inner children strive for, to feel safe and in control, and they'll freak out when it doesn't feel that way. So when someone betrays or cheats, it's really unconscious, it's subconscious. And here are some reasons why. Codependent relationships. When we're 7 years old and younger, our emotional body is formed, our emotional inner child. So it's during this time that we form our rate of exchange of emotion, what we feel we have to give in order to receive. We tend to either go overgiver, where we feel that we have to give so much in order to receive so little, or we may be so out of balance that we feel we need to take from others in order to get to a place where we can give. That is the environment of codependent relationships. Two adults enter a relationship, and it quickly turns into a parent-child relationship, with the overgiver taking on a parental role of giving or caretaker, and the other reverting to taker or being forced into a space where they're not allowed to give to the overgiver. Now, the overgiver consciously wants all the love and giving the taker could give, but subconsciously, in the realm of the emotional inner child, they don't feel we deserve that yet, so energetically, we don't allow the person to give to us. The overgiver gives and gives and gives until they're exhausted, and then they continue to give even more till they eventually can become resentful. Sound familiar? Does it resonate? Because most of you are overgivers, I can imagine. But the individual who is in a position of not being able to give to the overgiver, well, they still want to give too, but if our inner child won't allow them to give to us, then they will invest that energy of giving in other places, becoming a workaholic, going to the gym for endless hours, taking up a hobby where they invest all their energy, putting the energy into friends or affairs. Thus, the energy behind the cheating element in the codependent relationships. The subconscious rate of exchange is what can be looked at to edit that with the inner emotional child, where they will let down the force fields that keep the emotional and physical abundance away from us. And that can be one source of cheating. Looking for love in all the places. So it's not like the country song, looking for love in all the wrong places. This is looking for love in all the places. Because another source is that when someone is looking for love, because of those 3 buckets that I mentioned earlier, where we're taught to look outside of ourselves for our worth, and because we have focused in on trying to fill up ourselves with relationships with humans on the outside world, we will feel that emptiness, that empty feeling that's there. So until we find our inner unconditional love, we think the outer conditional love should fulfill us. After all, that's what we're taught. But the outside conditional love leaves us lacking, unfulfilled. So we think we need maybe someone else. Maybe it's this person that isn't fulfilling us. Or we might think we need more, not realizing that we are the source of our own unrest. So we might think, well, I need two people in my life because one doesn't do it. And especially if someone's been with several different individual people and they're not feeling that way, sometimes they'll revert to having 2 or 3 people, right? But eventually, we may begin to realize that there is a common denominator in all these scenarios: ourselves. We may become desperate or so bored in disappointment that eventually we all continually are nudged to turn inward to find that unconditional love that lives in our own hearts. It's what people do. So one last source of cheating can be influenced by what someone experienced and witnessed as they were growing up. They might have seen betrayal happen with their parents, siblings, friends, or others. They might have experienced some sort of betrayal themselves as a child that translates over into many different areas of their lives, where they feel they deserve to have anything that they want, no matter the expense to others, because they learned by example that's how things work. Now, it might be difficult for us to understand this if we didn't experience what they experienced, just as they might find it difficult to see where we're coming from with our own experiences. We might think that they should know better, and if they did inner work and grew up like adults should, then they would act differently, meaning they would act more like we expect them to, or act more like we think they should. But they might see us as petty with all our rules, and we might see them as unruly without having all our rules. See how that works? But when we seek to understand others instead of judge them, and also seek to understand ourselves instead of judge ourselves, things can become less conflicting. So there, of course, can be other sources that trigger cheating, but those are the ones I feel that Spirit wants to mention right now. All right, well, let's move on to what the heavens can tell us from their perspective. Upon review of my relationships, Spirit showed me what I was wanting to see about myself through these teachers who were going outside our agreed relationship terms, and also those who I felt were disrespecting me in other ways. There was a book, I believe it was The Path to Love by Deepak Chopra, which, by the way, is an excellent book to help us find our self-love. It's been around for a very long time, and I highly recommend it. You can probably pick it up from a used bookstore for cheap, so take that as you will. But I think it was this book that asked a simple question: what are you looking for in a mate? They give you a little line to fill out and ponder, and then when you turned the page, it talked about what you're looking for in someone else is what you're really looking for inside of yourself. So boom, that book went flying across the room. I felt betrayed by the book, right? But it just was for a little bit, because upon reflection, it did make sense. There was truth there. I was not respecting myself, and I was looking for a partner who would respect me in a lot of different ways. I was shrinking. I was becoming who I thought the other person thought I should be, without confirming with that other person who it is they were wanting me to be. Which is okay, because even if I had asked and conformed to what their wishes were, things would still have worked out the same, because my energy of inner disrespect would have drawn disrespect in some way somehow. So a big aha came when Spirit asked me specifically about the cheating experiences. They asked me what I had learned through these mirrors around betrayal and cheating. Meaning, if they were a mirror for me, then what did I learn about how I cheated? And at first I defended myself because I was always faithful to them, mind, soul, and body 100%. But they are always so gentle with me, of course, and they led me down a path asking me how I might have cheated or betrayed myself in these relationships. I mentioned the item we just talked about with shrinking, who I was, etc., but they said there was more. And then it hit me. I was cheating on myself with these other people because rather than defining my self-worth from my higher self, I was defining my self-worth from something other than myself. These other humans, their actions and non-actions, their word and silence. Oh my God, I was the cheater. I sat with that for a while and let it really sink in. I realized the truth in this, and it allowed me to release my resentments that I had toward my mirrors and look at them as my teachers who showed me what I wanted to see about myself until I saw it. And then I was also set free. I forgave myself and reconciled with my higher self, who had never had any judgment against me at all. They knew why and that it was all part of my adventure. So it was a very releasing experience. And one last perspective from Spirit is something that has come out through my weekly live reading sessions over these last couple of years, where I learned so much from the messages that I channel from Spirit for others. But this big one is that expectations suck the life out of anything, but especially relationships, because we take it a little more personally when something disappoints us. We take it less personally from like an entity, like a job or corporation, a company doing actions that bring an experience to us, versus if it's a specific person. We somehow take that more personally, right? We end up focusing on a list of what is and what is not happening, and we tend to focus more on what is not happening, thus bringing in more of not happening, because that's what our energy does. These expectations, as I call them, small t truths rooted in fear, are opinions, often popular opinions that were given to us when we were growing up, telling us all about, what a relationship is supposed to be, who they're supposed to be, what they're supposed to do, not supposed to do, what we're supposed to do. There's a lot of all this that I talk about the power of these stories in the previous podcast. So if you want to dive more into that, and if you haven't listened to it already, you can check that out. The links to the playlist are in the description box of the video below, and they'll be linked at the end of this video as well. I should have the playlist and video one that you can go back to and listen to that. Some great helpful information there as well. All right, hints from Spirit. This is one of my favorite sections of these episodes because we get to channel information from Spirit and find out how we can make our path easier. So we'll talk first with the power of emotional choice. One superpower that I became aware of is our power of choice, especially regarding our emotional choice. No one can truly emotionally hurt us or make us feel a certain way. I know in the beginning that's hard to hear, but stick with me, because no one can make us feel anything. Though quite often it can feel like they do. And why is that? Well, popular opinion tells us we should feel a certain way when things happen. The story behind what it should mean and our actions we should take. These opinions of others become our opinion because we don't realize we can say no or form our own opinion. Or when we try to form our own opinion, we are punished. Then these opinions become our habit. Then they feel so natural that they become our reaction, and an action is replayed over and over and over and reinforced over time because of all that. So it becomes habitual where it happens so fast we don't even feel like we're making the choice. It just something happens and we feel a certain way. But we can form a new habit. We can take a deep breath after we're aware that we had chosen a previous reaction. And we can ask, what is the new response we would rather choose in the future? And we can close our eyes and we can picture ourselves responding that new way. We can include physical action like writing it down or writing keywords down, or some sort of physical touch or action along with this new way of seeing ourselves respond. It can also include how we would feel if we responded the new way, breathing deep and staying calm through the process. Keep repeating this as much as you feel is necessary through the coming days, as often as you can. We formed our last reactions through repetitious habit forming, so that is how we can form a new habit that is in alignment with who we want to express ourselves as now. An affirmation you can use, if it feels right for you, is I choose my own emotions. I am not at the whim of the outside world. The world doesn't decide how I feel. I do. See if that helps. Gratitude is a game changer. And I mentioned expectations suck the life out of relationships. If I try to focus on not having expectations, I just draw more attention to the expectations and have more of them. That's what energy does. So whatever I focus on grows. So rather than focusing on what not to have in my life, I learned to focus on what I'm grateful for in my life right now. Because then I draw more things to be grateful for in my life. I focus on what I have and what I have had that I am grateful for. If I focus on what I want or I feel I need, well, that's lack energy, because my energy is saying, I don't have enough right now in this moment, so I want more. That is not have energy, so I then draw more not have experiences into my life instead. You see how the energy feels different. If I want a relationship in my life, then I focus on what I'm grateful for in regards to love in my life in this moment, even the non-romantical love and the love that I have had. I'm basically showing the Creator what I enjoy by my focus, and then they respond to that by bringing more of that into my life. It's like walking into a bakery and pointing at all the donuts I hate. That'll bring me a box of donuts I hate. So also pointing at all the donuts I love will bring me dozens of boxes of donuts that I love instead. A quick way for me to tell if I am in expectations or in gratitude is to do like a little emotional check-in to see how I'm feeling. So if I'm feeling like I'm behind and I'm trying to catch up, then I'm in expectations, because there's a high bar of expectations and so much energy that has to get invested just to get up to ground zero. And if I feel like I'm sitting in abundance, then I'm in gratitude. So gratitude is a game changer. And then lastly, we'll talk about editing the story, because we can edit our stories of what something means about us. How I edited my story of being cheated on, from meaning that I was worthless and not deserving, is that I first began to look inward to the definition of who I really am. As we've been talking about, we're taught to define ourselves by those 3 buckets of the outside, but that just leaves us on the clearance rack. And when we define ourselves by the outside world, we do feel worthless, because the retail price of the outside world is ever changing, depending on who's judging us and how they're feeling in the moment. So there is very little consistency out there. When I spend time connecting to the spirit world, experiencing their eternal unconditional love, then I can choose to define myself by that love, rather than the conditional love of the outside world. I change from being a clearance item to being someone that is priceless, someone who is deserving of such eternal, unconditional love. I fill up with that love from the inside, and then it overflows out to the world on the outside. I don't stop wanting love from the outside world necessarily, but I stop needing it. The world transforms from a place of lack to a place of abundance, because I'm filling up from the inside and overflowing, so any love from the outside world then becomes above and beyond extra. Finding a solid foundation of our worth from the inside world allows us to see the human characters more clearly. We can begin to see and understand what that other person must have experienced to act out of fear the way that they did or do. And we can remember that when a human character's inner child is feeling unsafe or out of control, it boots out the intelligent, loving, compassionate side. And it becomes a 2-year-old with its pet hissing cat attacking, running away, and doing all sorts of stupid, unloving, uncompassionate things, because at that age, we don't know a whole lot yet, right? At 2-year-old. So when someone is acting from that stupid place, we can know that they're in fear. When we're acting from our stupid place, then we can know that we are in fear. And knowing that everyone is expressing their inner fear or inner love in each moment, and that all of that has little to do with us, allows us to focus on the important. Our self-love, our self-fear, our own choices of story, emotion, energy, and actions. We feel less out of control, and that can feel so much easier. All right, I'm going to leave it here for now. I'm sure we'll have more adventures regarding love in the future, because it's such a big part of our adventures here. Round 2 of fighting will be the next episode, where we talk about the challenges with other types of relationships other than romantical ones. So keep a lookout on Facebook and Instagram for reminders throughout the week to help us refocus on this moment where an easier path exists. Links to my social media are in the description box of the video, along with my email. And I'd love to hear what challenges or tools to overcome your own challenges that you have or are experiencing on your human adventure. You can comment on this video, or you can send me an email if you prefer it not to be public. So thanks again for joining me, and until next time, remember, the human path can feel a little crazy and hazy, shaky and bakey, but you are loved eternally and unconditionally by the Mother and Father of all things, our Creator. And of course, I love you too. So enjoy your adventure, my Zen friend. I'll see you soon.